The hidden camp. Time and time again, the plans of the Witch King had been foiled because of the Shadow Warriors, who tirelessly patrol the plains and hills of Nagaraith. But this time, the Dark Elves were led by a general who knew all their secrets, including the locations of their hidden camps. Kaldor knew that he had to eliminate the Shadow Warriors' main camp, or else his supply lines would be continually harassed, and his main force would never be safe from ambushes. In addition, these troublesome meddlers could warn his accursed brother of his approach too early, robbing him of the element of surprise.
The Battle of Shadows, Scenario 2, has the High Elves deployed at the campsite within 8 inches at the centre of the table, deploying first, with the Dark Elves deploying second, giving them a tactical advantage and the element of surprise. Victory points are that the High Elves have to escape on the eastern side of the table. Every unit they can get off, they score 1 victory point, and the Dark Elves score victory points on the regular victory point table. The battle will last for exactly 5 turns, which represents the earliest hour of the morning to the end of dawn. And I'm sure some of the Warhammer veterans out there will be scratching their head thinking, why did Josh deploy all of his Shadow Warriors ranked up? Well, I think Paul pointed out during the game that maybe I was so excited knowing that they can rank up and they don't have to be in skirmish formation, I chose this formation to deploy in. But of course, placing myself at a disadvantage, as now they are easier to hit, and they can also get march blocked with units within 8 inches. So, apologies to all those High Elf fans out there. Maybe I should just be painting the High Elves and not actually playing the High Elves. Master of Shadows Alatar was deployed last with his very special magical Jade Bow. With the High Elves now fully deployed around the campfire, it was Paul's chance now to exploit all the weaknesses in my deployment with deploying all of his Dark Elves. Paul kept his list as accurate as possible to the historical lists, whereas I chose the battle scroll as I could not fulfill all the unit choices given the historical list, but gave an account of all the units represented in the battle itself. The battle scrolls in each of the campaign sets are a wonderful way. If you cannot fulfill every single model in the historical lists, it gives you set boundaries and limitations on the units you can take, and it allows you to actually flexibly create your own lists. The Prince of Shadows shook the black hand of the Dark Elf Assassin Lord, and then the game got underway with the Dark Elves taking the very first turn. The Harpies eagerly flapped their leathery wings to charge the 5 hapless High Elf bowmen at the centre of the camp. The Witch Elves also declared a charge against the surprised High Elf archers, but fell short on the charge distance, so they moved up 5 inches. As the Harpies took flight, the High Elves reacted with a stand and shoot charge reaction. No surprise though, as no hits were struck, so the Harpies were safe to come in and start tearing away at the High Elf archers in the hand-to-hand combat phase. The Dark Riders and the Dark Steeds galloped up on the flank of the table edge, and the Dark Elf Crossmen on that side of the table also made a regular move to encircle the camp. Dark Elf Scouts emerged from the forest edges to take their shots against the now easier to hit Shadow Warriors. Kaldath and his assassins also took this advantage, knowing that the Shadow Warriors were easier to hit, and took to their positions to open fire in the shooting phase. The devilish Dark Riders, not getting a -1 for moving and shooting due to their horse riding expertise, managed to fell 2 of the High Elf archers, with the brave High Elf archers passing their panic check. The Dark Elf repeating crossbowman, even though having moved, managed to score 2 hits, blocking one of the hits on a 6, but then felling one of the Shadow Warriors. And on the opposite side of the battlefield, I was under pressure again with a repeating crossbowman opening up on the Shadow Warriors and taking one down in the process. The Dark Elf invaders, and playing to their strengths, opened up with a repeating crossbowman from both the assassins and the scouts. Seeing the horrors of my tactical mistake, having the Shadow Warriors ranked up, they managed to execute all 5 Shadow Warriors in the front and also killing a number of them in the rear units behind them. With the scent of blood in the air, the Harpies tore into the High Elf archers, but to their surprise inflicted no wounds. The High Elf archers retaliated, struck out, inflicting 2 wounds on the Harpies. Much to our surprise, the Harpies broke and fled. The High Elves decided to pursue. Courage filled the hearts of the High Elf bowmen as they saw off the Harpies. The brave archers were just falling short of their pursuit roll, so they decided to follow up and make the Harpies target practice in their next turn. The High Elf turn began with a charge, and the Reaver Knights decided to charge the Dark Elf scouts that had emerged from the forest. The Giant Eagle had its feasting eyes on the repeating Dark Elf crossman, both units declaring a stand and shoot charge reaction. The Giant Eagle was granted safe passage as the charge was actually too close for the repeating crossbowman to get a shot off. And it must have been that shining bright brilliance of white from the Reavers charging in against the Scouts that managed to fail all of their shots as they charged into hand-to-hand combat. Alatar, the Shadow King, turned around to face the greatest threat of all, and that were the Witch Elves with his Jade Bow. And the Shadow Warriors started to move towards the eastern flank of the table edge to their safety and sanctuary. And much to my surprise, as well as Paul, we didn't actually realise that Dark Elf had an obedience test when fighting against High Elves, which is kind of like an animosity test for the Dark Elves. They've got to roll a d6 for each unit that's within 24 inches of a High Elf unit at the start of their turn, on the roll of 1, meaning that they lose control and they have to charge towards or march towards that unit. And with moving out of the way, it was up to shooting, with the High Elf bowman taking aim, inflicting more pain and misery on the Harpies with another wound. The High Elf archers on the other side took shots at the Dark Riders, felling 1 in the process. Hooray! Alatar, the Prince of Shadows, is kind of like Al Pacino in Scarface in Warhammer 5th edition with his Jade Bow, allowing him to shoot at 30 inches. Every time he hits, wounds and kills a model in a unit, he's allowed to repeat that process, hitting and wounding and killing, which I did over and over again, which I loved, until I get to that roll, which you know what, sadly ending Alatar's fun. With his sharpened talons and curved beak at the ready, scoring 2 hits, but failing to wound any of the Dark Elf repeated crossbowmen, they retaliated and inflicting a wound, resulting in me breaking, fleeing, and flying away to be pursued and cut down, ending the life of the Giant Eagle in the first turn. With my hopes then settling on the Illyrian Reavers and their close combat phase, their charge with their horses and their spears inflicted enough wounds to wipe out the entire Dark Elf Scout unit. With the High Elves now ending their turn, causing some relief in certain quarters of the battlefield, but it wasn't over yet, with the Dark Elves having turn 2. The Dark Elf turn started off with checking for obedience. How obedient were these Dark Elves going to be? Well, one of the Dark Elf repeating crossbowman units failed on a 1, meaning that to charge the closest unit, but the other remaining units were fine and could move, shoot and charge normally during the turn. Paul declared a charge with one of his Dark Elf assassins with the armour of meteoric iron. I decided to flee. As the Illyrian Reapers are able to shoot and flee as a charge reaction, scoring a wound, but the meteoric iron saved him. On the side of the campsite, some crazy blood-drinking witches were charging my High Elf archers, but they didn't inflict any wounds in their stand and shoot reactions. Not to be trampled underfoot by the Dark Riders, the other 3 High Elf archers decided to flee. And the hairy bat-winged beasts of the Harpies failed their rally roll and then fled again another 7 inches towards the table edge. Kaldath urged the other Dark Elf units to start surrounding the encampment, making it harder and harder for me to get off my units off the eastern side of the table edge. Seeing all those repeating crossbowmen lining up to shoot at my Shadow Warriors, I was now thinking, Josh, that wasn't such a good idea, was it, ranking up all those Shadow Warriors? Kaldath knew the threat that the Shadow Warriors possessed in the very final battle, as each Shadow Warrior that leaves that eastern side of the table will then be able to inflict D3 Strength 3 hits on a unit before the game begins. So killing as many Shadow Warriors as possible was Kaldath's main objective, inflicting another 3 wounds upon the 2 units. I think we need to get a bucket for the Witch Elves in future games, as so many dice were dished out upon those poor High Elf archers that none would survive, not to my surprise really. Thankfully, the archers and Alatar held their nerve as they saw their brethren cut down mercilessly by the blood-drinking Witch Elves, and now we can go to High Elf turn 2. Many High Elf Warhammer players will be very relieved to know that I did decide to go into a skirmish formation at this point with my Shadow Warriors, because it allowed them much more flexibility in movement, it stopped them from being march blocked, and the whole objective of this particular scenario is really getting as many of those Shadow Warriors off the eastern side table as I could, and hopefully most of them will survive the ensuing repeated crossbow fire. And thankfully both of my fleeing units of archers and Illyrian Reavers rallied in the rally phase, and then they reformed to form new positions of line of defense against the Dark Elves. High Elf archers wanting to inflict more torment upon the fleeing Harpies, but inflicting no wounds in the process. My Al Pacino Alatar was back again with his Jade Bow, inflicting more deaths, more wounds on the advancing Witch Elves, but alas, I failed to wound one of them, ending my rapid-firing Jade Bow for the turn. Starting the Dark Elf turn now, rolling for obedience tests, but alas, all of them passed, and were able to move and shoot as normal. Paul also remembered that his blood-drunk Witch Elf champion had to roll for Frenzy. If you roll over your number of attacks, it means you lose an attack, which he did. In their bitchy witchiness, the Witch Elves decided to charge Alatar. He decided to make a tactical retreat, and drawing them in, keeping the Shadow Warriors safe from them and getting them safely off the eastern side of the table. Sensing Alatar's ruse, the Dark Elf Dark Riders, along with some repeating crossbowmen, decided to join Kaldath as they try to seize the Shadow Warriors before they made their way off safely on the eastern side of the table. Seizing his chance, one of the Dark Elf assassins decided to charge the closest Shadow Warrior unit, but making a tactical retreat 7 inches away and 7 inches closer to safety. Enraged, Kaldeth ordered all units of repeating crossbowmen to centre and focus all their attention on those Shadow Warriors. And the assassin with the armour of meteoric iron decided to face off against the Illyrian Reavers. The memories of those High Elf archers causing wounds on the Harpies must have really unsettled them as they failed their rally test again, fleeing another 7 inches towards the nearest table edge. But much to Paul's relief, the 7 inches did not end their move off the table. Piling on the pressure, the Dark Riders shot with their repeating crossbows, inflicting several hits, but, thanks to the luck of the gods, no wounds. In desperation, the Dark Elves let off as many repeated crossbow bolts as they could, but the blessed armour of the Shadow Warriors protected them. With the High Elves making their strategical retreats, it was time to make their rally rolls, which they all did, which allowed them to reform to face their oncoming enemies. The fast-moving Illyrian cavalry had their sights on exiting the eastern side of the table for their safety, along with the Shadow Warriors, where 4 of them managed to make it off the edge of the table. The harassing Elven archers took shots at the fleeing gargoyles, but wasn't able to penetrate their leathery hides. With no hand-to-hand combat or any other further actions, it was over to the Dark Elves again. No Dark Elf unit dared to disobey the orders of Kaldeth and awaited the orders of their master for his bidding. Compulsed, frenzied Witch Elves declared a charge on Alatar, but Alatar decided to make another tactical retreat, drawing them further in and allowing Alatar more time to escape before the end of the turn. Alatar screamed the words on those dice as he only rolled a lowly 3, and the Witch Elves cutting him down and overrunning him, resulting in our general dead. I didn't really fancy my chances against the Witch Elf champion, but if I remembered I had Blade Dancer, which allowed me a 4+ against all wounds in hand-to-hand combat, which could have saved me. And playing to the 5th edition rules, when you lose your general, you have to make a panic test for all of your units on the tabletop. Luckily, everyone passed. With their leader Alatar lost, the remaining archers decided to flee away, with the Witch Elves in hot pursuit. Kaldeth, knowing that time was against him, ordered all the remaining Dark Elf units to pursue the escaping Shadow Warriors. After all the remaining moves were made, it was time to try to rally those Harpies.
Nope. Off the board.
All the Harpies.
All that money and time.
Yeah.
And
This wasn't their day. Seeing the Harpies off, it was time for the repeating crossbowmen to take advantage of the retreating Shadow Warriors, but not resulting in any wounds, much to my surprise. And of course, Paul's too. Perhaps it was the spirit of Alatar himself overlooking his brother Shadow Warriors and protecting them, but of all of those dice and all of the shots from the repeating crossbows, remarkably none of those shots resulted in wounds. So, in turn 4 of the High Elves, we mustered the courage to rally, as it was their last line of defense to see the Shadow Warriors then escape from the eastern side of the table. And the sacrifice those brave warriors had to make will not be forgotten. Sadly for the Illyrian Reavers, they fell short to escape off the eastern side of the table with their 18-inch move. Hope and a prayer, the Elves open up another volley of arrows onto the Witch Elves, hoping to kill all of them, securing another victory point, but alas, only 2 fell. We decided to end the battle here on turn 4, even though the actual battle lasts for 5 turns, But I think we both decided that the Shadow Warriors were the main objective, to get off the edge of the table. And with that secured, we can now count up the victory points for the Dark Elves and see how we managed to do at the end of the game. If only I had been smarter and not lost Alatar, otherwise the High Elves would have prevailed and won the game comfortably. A huge thanks goes out to Owen Staten for his wonderful voice work in the production of these videos. Please go and check out his podcast, Time Between Times, or you can contact him at owenstaten@aol.com. Finally, thank you to all of my patrons who enable me financially to make the time to make these videos for you to enjoy on YouTube. And thank you again massively for watching this video. I love all my viewers who comment, who like, who subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much again. It's a massive blessing. And I look forward to bringing you the third scenario for Tears of Isha very soon.